What's up guys, it's Bliskin here, and you guys really liked the last video we did talking about what guns would Venom Snake actually take with him on his missions if he were a real life dude. So I figure, you know what, since a lot of people requested it, let's go on with the series and talk about the different snakes and their different situations and talk about what guns would best suit their missions. And I figure since we're starting this off, why don't we take it back to where the series really hit off with Metal Gear Solid 1. Now, before we start talking explicitly about the guns that we're going to be bringing in with us, we need to talk about things we're going to be facing in the environment. So the first one is obviously icing. We are in sub-zero temperatures. Icing does crazy amounts of damage to guns. Even some of the most reliable weapons on the planet can become dangerous misfires waiting to happen if they freeze over for too long. So this is definitely a factor we need to keep in mind when picking certain guns. We need to keep in mind the fact that we're going to be wet a lot of the time. There are vents that we're going to crawl through that are filled with water. There's areas that we have to go through that are filled with water. The mission starts off with snake swimming, so if a gun chokes up because you get a little bit of water in it, it's not a good fit for this mission. Now, this one might surprise you guys a little bit, but extreme heat. You might think, oh, Shadow Moses is all ice, water, and cold, right? No, there are a lot of furnace rooms. So if you're using a weapon and overheating is something to be concerned about, you might have issues. This is a much more niche kind of issue that you'll only face in certain areas, but it doesn't change the fact that this is a genuine concern. Lastly, in regards to the environment, we gotta keep in mind that Snake is using gloves. There's certain weapons that just have ergonomics that are not gonna go kindly with wearing heavy winter gloves. It's a small detail that many people might go over, but it's important. Now let's talk about some of the more practical use factors that are less so about the environment, but just things we generally need to keep in mind that we're gonna experience on this mission. So first up, we need something that can fit the niche of long-range rifle fights. Sniper Wolf, the guys on the bridge. There's going to be situations where the fights may go above 300 meters. We need to keep this in mind, otherwise we are going to find ourselves outmatched. We need something that'll suit the niche of CQB. While there are going to be these stretches of land experience and encounters that are going to be very far range, we're also going to be in a very close-knit set and series of hallways. If we don't have something that works around tight corners and small spaces, we're going to be at a serious disadvantage. On the note of compact spaces, we're going to be crawling through a lot of vents and tunnels that are very squished together, so we can't have something that's too big and too bulky that might catch on a vent or not let us crawl through somewhere. Mobility is going to be important when we're sneaking around, so we can't just run around with a huge ass LMG, because as soon as it comes time to crawl through a vent, we're gonna have a problem. We're gonna be in some very dark spaces. This means we're going to need to have something to see, whether this is a flashlight, some kind of optic, or goggles. We need to keep this in mind. Also, we need to keep in mind what kind of guns we're bringing into these dark spaces, because even the darkness of your home at night, using a handgun in that pitch black dark could blind and deafen you potentially. So if we're bringing a rifle that's going to have a lot of muzzle flash and is going to be really loud in these dark confined spaces, we're not going to be able to accomplish shit if we're blinded. We gotta keep in mind that we're going up against the genome soldiers. These are genetically modified soldiers, and as such, can probably take more than your average human being. So we need to keep this in mind. Maybe we bring in high caliber weapons, maybe we do our best to overcompensate for their, heightened speed, agility, that kind of stuff. We're not going up against just, random bumpkins. We're going up against, in the Metal Gear universe at least, the best of the best. But it's not just going to be the genome soldiers we need to worry about. There's multiple situations in which we need to be worried about wolves. Wolves hunt in packs, they are big, They are stronger and they are faster than us, so we need a weapon that can counter them in these close range and crowd control necessary situations. Lastly, we have the Metal Gear and choppers and vehicles, so we're going to need some kind of explosive anti-material heavy hitter in order to take those things down. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, it was very difficult for me to pick something to be our main arm. At first, I was thinking, okay, this is a stealth operation, we need something that's extremely quiet. So I was thinking of an MP5 SD, similar to what we gave Venom. In regards to icing, you can break off the icing since you can tug on that charging handle and it has a paddle release. The paddle release magazines are very resilient to a lot of icing issues, whereas button releases tend to have issues like that because they get stuck and there's ice between the button, but a paddle release allows you to really crank out that magazine. At the same time, there's certain ergonomics, like the magazine well is very narrow, so trying to get that perfect with gloves might be awkward. But honestly, it's not the ergonomics that turned me off from the MP5 SD. It's the fact that we're going up against really well armored, really well trained, really well equipped, and really well genetically built soldiers. I just fear the 9mm isn't gonna be enough, and the MP5 isn't that much of a compact package and would take up as much space as most SBRs or PDWs. So I just think the 9mm itself is the one thing holding the MP5 back in this scenario. Well, the integral edition of the Metal Gear Solid game that released only in Japan, and people on PC can play it and all that, shows us that the MP5 seems to work. The reality is that that's just kind of a reskinned FAMAS with a suppressor. It's kind of like a better version of the FAMAS in-game, but in real life, the 9mm, especially up against body armored opponents, is not really going to get you through the fight. So at this point here, I started thinking, okay, let's start thinking about rifles, something with a more competent amount of oomph behind every shot. And when I thought about the winter climate as well, and something that's just reliable for water, overheats but still functions when it overheats sort of thing, I thought about the AK. Again, you got that paddle release magazine, the charging handles, and an easy to access spot, even with gloves, and it's just a tank of a weapon that'll go through anything you throw at it. And the 7.62x39 or the 5.45 round are both competent enough against these opponents. The 7.62x39 just hits you so hard that, yeah, your armor might stop it because it's moving slower, but you're still gonna feel it. And the 5.45 tends to work as well as 5.56 in a lot of these armored scenarios. But the thing was, with this AK platform, I just thought to myself, okay, it isn't really that compact. And if we go to something more compact like the Krinkov, once we get into those dark spaces, it's going to blind and deafen the fuck out of us. It's not a very comfortable weapon to use, and we gotta think about that in this scenario. So there's just a couple issues with the size and how if you shorten the barrel on an AK, it becomes a very unwieldy weapon. So at this point here, I was like, okay, maybe an AS Val. The AS Val fires the 9x39mm, which is a armor-piercing subsonic round for close-range encounters. It's pretty much the Russian equivalent of the 300 Blackout. And yeah, this kind of seemed like the solution. It can go a lot more compact, you can get that integral suppressor and still have it be relatively quiet, not as quiet as a suppressed 9mm, mind you, but still quiet enough where if you're in a blizzard taking pot shots at enemies, you might be able to conceal your presence. However, another issue arose once we came to this point. Yes, we have our compact weapon that'll still work in the icy, watery, hot environments of Shadow Moses. It has a lot of the same ergonomics as the AK, so you can whip out that magazine with that paddle magazine release and you still have the charging handle, so gloves shouldn't be too much of an issue, but it just doesn't have enough range for those further encounters. So at this point here, I was like, okay, it seems like we're stuck in the middle of trying to find a gun that's good for those long-range firefights, but also works for our stealthy encounters, and I just couldn't find something. Now at this point here, I really started to feel like I was stuck in the middle. I could find a gun that was really good for stealth, but it wouldn't be good for combat. And I could find guns that were good for combat, but they weren't good for stealth. And then when I felt like I found a gun that could work for both, it had shit range. So I didn't know what to do at this point. So I compromised. I said, okay, you know what? I'm gonna focus more on a compact combat package rather than a do-it-all kind of gun. And with that in mind, I came to the conclusion that the best gun to bring with us for this scenario would be the Steyr AUG. The AUG has many of the ergonomic strengths of an AK, so it's going to do well in ice, it's going to do well in water. You still have that charging handle in an easy position. You still have that magazine release, that paddle magazine release, depending on the variant. And it's going to be a very reliable kind of weapon for that. You have the trigger guard that's nice and open, so even with gloves you can get in there. It's a pretty good package. And with a competent 16-inch barrel, you have a very compact package because of that bullpup design. So if you throw on a decent thermal optic that allows you to see up to like 300 to 400 meters, you have something that isn't going to be as great as a sniper rifle for, you know, the sniper wolf and bridge scenarios, but you'll still have something that could reach out to those ranges, albeit with some difficulty. And since the AUG is a short stroke gas piston system, you should be able to suppress it without compromising the reliability of the weapon. It's not going to be super quiet, and even in a blizzard if you're firing this, enemies might still hear it. However, in those darker scenarios where you're going through caves and such, you're not going to go blind and you're not going to go deaf. So the suppressor is more so for your comfort. So here we have a compact package that can reach out to most of the ranges we're going to need and can still work in a lot of those CQB roles. And with that thermal optic and suppressor, those darker situations aren't going to be too much of an issue. Now, while I'm confident that a custom designed AUG specifically set up for this mission would do Snake very well in CQB and longer range scenarios and against body armor and all the different kinds of enemies, I do think we need a compact package for extreme close range scenarios. When we're going up against wolves or guys in extreme close quarters where even that bullpup package might have the suppressor at the end of the barrel get snagged on something, we need a backup sort of weapon or an auxiliary, not necessarily secondary weapon, but just something else in our arsenal that we can whip out for incredibly niche scenarios. So I was thinking that we'd also give Snake a Serbu Super Shorty shotgun. I'm primarily imagining it for wolves, as the 5.56, yeah, it might work, but pelting multiple rounds into the wolves might be difficult, especially when there's a lot of them coming at you. Having a compact shotgun that's about the same size as the SOCOM to just whip it out and just pump around into them and, you know, take it down with 1 or 2 shots is probably something that would be nice to have. The pump action design makes me feel comfortable in situations where there's icing, as if there is ice getting in the way of that, you have a nice action that allows you to really grip the weapon and tug on it to move past that ice. So yeah, I feel confident in that regard as well. And you could also take advantage of a lot of the niche utility roles with a pump action shotgun. So you guys remember the nuke hangar in which Naomi uses nanomachines to deactivate your ability to use weapons because she's concerned that, oh, what if one of the bullets hits the missile but then the enemies can still shoot you and it's total bullshit? Yeah, with a shotgun you could use rubber slugs. So having a non-lethal round that's not really going to do anything to those missiles but it'll still fuck up the genome soldiers coming at you if need be is gonna be a godsend, and who knows, might save your life. You guys remember when I said I had a hard time figuring out what kind of rifle or SBR package to bring in with you? I lied. The hardest time I had in this video was figuring out what we're gonna do with a pistol. I was initially thinking of the FN57 because You know, it doesn't have that same trigger safety like Glocks do, so it's not going to get any ice in between that, making the gun inoperable, which is an issue that Glocks tend to have in extreme cold environments. I liked it because it was striker fired, so you wouldn't have to worry about ice getting into the hammer. But the fact of the matter is, we need something that's just going to be quieter. We need something that's just going to have more ammo availability. While the 5.7 is a great round, I don't think there's any of that on Shadow Moses. There's definitely 5.56 for AUG. Shotgun rounds are going to be used incredibly nichely, so we don't have to worry too much about ammo scarcity with that, since it's more so of an extra option rather than our main arm. But with a pistol, I had to cave in, and I think we're just going to take a USP in 45 that's a lot more compact than the SOCOM. One of the more modern variants of the weapon that's much more compact and lighter. You can still suppress 45 decently, not as well as subsonic 9mm, but yeah, you're gonna find more ammo for this thing. The USP is a reliable gun. You do have to worry about icing getting into where the hammer is, but even with that potential issue happening, you have the extended trigger guard, so even with gloves you can get your finger in there. It's just a very good gun for this situation. Just keep your eye on where that hammer is, make sure there's no ice getting in there, and you have something that's mostly suppressible. The 45 has enough oomph to stop guards dead in their tracks, and you're gonna find ammunition for this weapon. So because of that, yeah, I'm caving in and I'm going with something that's double action. And if any of you guys know me, you know I hate double action and will die by striker fired. But in this niche situation, yeah, I gotta cave. So the USB 45 compact with a suppressor outfitted on it, maybe a flashlight underneath there, and you have your pistol for the situation. Now, in regards to what you're going to use for vehicles, the metal gear, and all this kind of stuff, I was toying with a couple ideas. Maybe a decent 40mm that you could attach to the AUG, maybe a 40mm like an M203 pistol variant that you can keep on you. But it's not really going to do much against a metal gear. It's going to be very hard to hit a chopper with this. So then I started thinking about things like, okay, you have C4 on base, you could just put a shit ton of that on the metal gear. But if you get into a situation where you have to fight it, you're still going to be fucked, and good luck trying to throw C4 at a moving helicopter. So because of this, yeah, you're not going to bring anything with you that is explosive. There's already Stinger missiles on the base. Now, I don't expect you to cram 30 of them up your ass like Solid Snake. Just carrying one of these bad boys is going to be very difficult, but if you're in a situation where you're going to need an explosive weapon, you can find one of these Stinger missiles and you can bring it along there. If you're going up against, the chopper, one Stinger missile is going to be enough to take that down. You're not going to need to shoot it a bunch of times. When it comes to the metal gear, it's harder to tell because that's a fictional thing, so who the fuck knows how much it can take. But if you just manage to survive the fight long enough for Grey Fox to come and open up the cockpit, one Stinger missile, or hell, even a round of 5.56 placed well enough towards liquid is going to take him down. So here we are at the end of the video. This was a hard one. Much harder than it was to figure out what Venom Snake should use. Because Shadow Moses is such an extreme environment that demands so much, both in its weather, in the opponents you're going up against, in the vehicles, and the wildlife. But I think having that custom AUG set up for that winter operation with its suppressor and its thermal optic is going to give you the edge in most scenarios. As you get more rounds than the FAMAS, you're much more versatile than something with like a longer weapon. You have that edge in darker environments, whereas the Genome soldiers might not be able to see. You got that thermal optic. The Serbu Super Shorty is going to be like your get out of jail free card if a wolf is trying to maul you, if a Genome soldier turns the corner and he's a little too close. This thing is pretty much the same size as the SOCOM. It's gonna kick and it's gonna be very uncomfortable to use, but if you really need something that has enough punch to just put anything remotely human-sized down, this thing is going to be great. Having those non-lethal rounds in that area where Naomi disables all your lethal weapons is going to be great, and having specialty rounds can really open up some options for you to guarantee your survival. The USP-45 definitely has its flaw in the sense that it's double action and has that exposed hammer, but besides that, this is the closest you're going to get to a practical stealth pistol package. And again, ammo availability was the biggest thing that made me choose this USP-45. The FN-57 would work as a pistol. There's a bunch of other guns that would work as a pistol, but in terms of a tactical 45 package, USP, especially for winter environments, still hasn't been beat out. And then having to drag a Stinger missile when the need calls for it. That's the best that I could think of for this situation, but what do you think? Is there a better rifle that would have done stealth and long range better than the AUG? Do you think the shotgun is unnecessary? Do you think I should have gone with the 5.7 instead of the USP? What do you think about bringing grenades? And is there some kind of miracle rocket launcher that you can carry multiple rounds for and keep on you and still be able to fit in the vent? Let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like, and if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, or just see some of the weirder stuff I do every now and then, go ahead and subscribe. This has been Pliskin Boy, over and out.
This is Solid Snake. Hey, subscribe to Pliskin Boy. God damn it.
You heard him.